All right, good morning, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. My name is Jason Giulietti, as was mentioned, with the Greater San Marcos Partnership. And certainly on behalf of the Greater San Marcos Partnership and the Greater San Marcos Area Chamber of Commerce, we welcome you to the 2022 Transportation Summit. We're very excited because this is the second year of our collaboration between our organizations. And certainly I hope, as you see in the content and what's going to be discussed, we tried to cover an array of topics that will really get to hopefully issues all of you confront personally or from a business perspective. But before we get into that, I want to quickly recognize just a couple special guests and dignitaries, of course. First is our sponsors. This is how all this gets put on. And our community sponsors, and we'll maybe run through each list and then applaud them for, again, their support of this. Starting with our community sponsors, Cobb Fenley, Lacima, Colorado Materials, Texas State University, and Texas Disposal Systems. Thank you very much for your community support. Next is our summit sponsors. That is Adura, Half and Associates, Corridor Title Company, Berry Aviation, and Texas Regional Bank. Thank you very much as summit sponsors. And probably the one most important here is our lunch sponsors that are feeding you guys. That is My Emergency Room 24/7, Pam Specialty Rehabilitation Hospital of Luling, and Gary Job Corps. Thank you very much as lunch sponsors. I do also want to thank the investors, both of the partnership and of the San Marcos Area Chamber of Commerce. I think it's very important, the work that goes into that and those investors that support each organization, both public sector and private sector. Those resources really help us put on events like this and continue to do the work that we do to attract jobs, investments, and support our local business community. So thank you to both of our organizations, board leadership and investors. I also want to put a quick thank you out to Texas State University, highlighting just a really amazing thing that happened since we last got together. And this, I'm looking over here at Cassie as well from Amazon, an amazing relationship that just gave birth there between Amazon and the university. And that is that recognition between the Amazon Center collaborating with upskilling and covering college tuition, industry certification, and foundational job skills for workers throughout Hays and Caldwell County to enhance their ability to grow and succeed within Amazon or certainly within other career fields. So very, very excited about that collaboration, truly investing in our community. So thank you to both Texas State and Amazon. Thank you for that relationship. And then last, I also want to thank our public sector dignitaries. If you are an elected official in Hays or Caldwell County, please stand for us. I know we have several here. Judge, good morning. Thank you guys for your service. Thank you very much for your leadership. We certainly appreciate that and couldn't do a lot without you guys. So thank you very much. With that, I want to introduce and start up our program more formally, and that is our keynote speaker. That is Mr. Ed Mortimer, Vice President of Transportation Infrastructure for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. You guys have his bio on the seat, but I'll give you a quick highlight that Ed serves as the Vice President of Transportation Infrastructure for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Mortimer oversees the development and implementation of the Chamber's transportation infrastructure policy and represents the Chamber on Capitol Hill, as well as before the administration and industry organizations. He leads the Americas for Transportation Mobility Coalition, a collaborative effort of business, labor, transportation stakeholders, and concerned citizens that advocate for increased federal investment in the nation's infrastructure to ensure we reduce burden and grow it strategically. So with that, Mr. Mortimer will now take our virtual stage. Thank you very much.
Hey guys, Ed Mortimer, I appreciate that. Sorry, I had a little technology problem there, but hope everybody's doing well. And I wish I could be there in San Marcos with you all. I want to thank Jason Yu. I want to thank Jason Mock of the Chamber and all of you for your support and your efforts on an issue that is so important to the business community and something that from the U.S. Chamber's perspective, we see as something that's going to really lay the groundwork down for economic growth. And modernizing our infrastructure has always been something that is kind of the circulatory system of economic growth. So as we look at, government sometimes gets involved in too many things, but one of the things we truly need the federal government to do is make sure we have a national infrastructure network that allows every American to compete in the global marketplace and also improves the quality of life of all of our citizens. And you in the central Texas area know that infrastructure really is vitality, it's jobs, it's the ability to compete. And I heard Jason talking in the introduction, Amazon, I know, is a big presence in your region. We're looking at some of the supply chain challenges around our country, and we really see this infrastructure bill is really going to help move distribution centers further inland. Most people think of supply chain as the ports on the coast, down in Laredo, but we're seeing more and more distribution centers moving inland. And we think this federal bill is going to have a big part of ensuring that communities like the St. Marcos area are going to continue to thrive and grow for the next 20 years. So let me take a few minutes to kind of go through what this infrastructure bill means to the country, to Texas, to your region, and then some opportunities that I think you all need to think about as the federal government begins implementing, sending money to Texas, and making sure that businesses in the St. Marcos area region get the amount of investment necessary, and make sure the funding goes to the right projects that are truly going to be game changing. Let me just start the presentation by saying, to get this infrastructure bill done, it was done in a bipartisan way. And that's not just being Pollyannish. We at the U.S. Chamber for many years felt that to get long-term durable policy, we needed to get both political parties on board. And there's an old saying in Washington that there is no Republican road or Democrat bridge. And so we worked very hard over the last 10 years. We worked with Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, with bipartisan groups in Congress to finally get an infrastructure bill that's a once in a generational opportunity to not just fix old infrastructure, but to modernize it, to think anew. You might remember we built our interstate highway systems back in the 50s and 60s. We built inland waterways back in the early 1900s. Water pipes in our country are almost 100 years old. The private sector has moved a long way from innovation and technology. And we're seeing other countries like China are vastly moving ahead of us in the infrastructure debate. The World Economic Forum just ranked the US infrastructure 13th in the world. 13th, even though by far we have the greatest economy. And that's a drop from 8 2 years ago. So we continue to drop because we've lacked the federal vision and investment to modernize our infrastructure. And so, we worked with, again, a bipartisan group in Congress to put together a substantial bill, and not just a road and bridge bill, but really hard infrastructure, the physical infrastructure that businesses need to thrive. So our transportation networks, airports, ports and waterways, transit. We also looked at the energy sector and working with our private partners to harden the grid and making sure we have modern transmission lines and pipelines, getting the lead out of lead pipes. And so every American has clean drinking water. Rural broadband. Over 16% of Texans don't have broadband access. You're not going to be successful economically if you don't have broadband access. And so we think there are a lot of private sector solutions to bring to that debate. And there's $65 billion from the federal government over the next 5 years to ensure that every American citizen has that broadband access that they need to compete and to thrive in the 21st century. You can't just get broadband access when your kid's at school or at Starbucks. We need to make sure that every American has solid broadband access. And again, our private sector colleagues in the telecommunications industry have done a great job to provide us the best broadband in the world. You might have just seen we've just released 5G. And again, they are willing to work with the government to get broadband to certain communities that previously hadn't had the customer base to get it, but now they do. And now we're going to make sure that with public-private partnerships, the dream of having every American get that broadband access is going to be had. This was not an easy debate, as many of you are aware. We had a vote in the Senate earlier this year But, and the bill came together. It's $550 billion in new investment in our nation's infrastructure over 5 years. It also includes an additional $550 billion in previously authorized investment over an 8-year period. So again, it's about a little over $1 trillion. We have not seen this type of investment in infrastructure since Dwight Eisenhower developed the interstate highway system. So again, once in a generational investment in our infrastructure. We worked with a bipartisan group in the United States Senate, 10 Republicans, 10 Democrats. It was led by Rob Portman, who's a Republican senator from Ohio, and Kristen Sinema, a Democrat senator from Arizona. The bill came together, and when it came to a vote in the United States Senate, we got 69 yes votes, which is over 2/3 of the Senate approved this bill. I can tell you that with the partisanship we're seeing in Washington right now, you couldn't get 69 votes to vote on the day of the week, much less on a bipartisan major investment in our infrastructure. But again, we give a lot of credit to the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who got 19 Republicans, or 40% of the Republican caucus, to vote for this much needed investment in America's infrastructure. Unfortunately, we were not able to get the 2 Texas senators, but it wasn't through lack of effort and a lot of you communicating to them the importance of these infrastructure needs. And so we're going to continue to work on them moving forward. Then the bill came to the House of Representatives. And again, a lot of people have tried to conflate the bipartisan physical infrastructure bill with what the administration and Democrats are calling Build Back Better, which is a social spending bill, which is going through a partisan process called reconciliation. That is not the same bill as this physical infrastructure bill, which again, business community, labor, environmentalists all came together to say, we need the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And at the same time, the business community said, we don't need Build Back Better. We need to focus investments on infrastructure that physically is going to enhance the lives of the American people for the long term, and not in short-term spending that is not the right time to do. And so we separated the 2 bills when it came to the House, and we were able to get a vote where 13 Republicans joined almost every Democrat to move this bill through the House of Representatives. On November 15th of this year, President Biden signed the bill into law. And again, it was a difficult fight, but in our view, it was a fight worth fighting. And now we're on to the next phase of this, is making sure these investments are going to the projects that truly make a difference. Let me just take a minute to run down what this bill means for Texas and your community. So for highways, where Texas has a $15 billion gap in funding, this bill is going to deliver over $28 billion in new investment to your state's highway program. That's an over 52% increase in funding. I can tell you TxDOT, and I know you're going to hear from some speakers later in this session, they have a lot of infrastructure needs that they're very excited to make the investments now that the federal government has stepped up. So again, we're going to see some game changers. And I know, like in your region, I-35 is such a critical corridor. This is going to enhance and expedite speeding up getting I-35 done. It's been worked on for many years, but the investments that come from this federal bill are going to help get the job done. For bridges, the state's going to receive $537 million in bridge repairs over the next 5 years. Again, historically high levels of investment in bridges and making sure that they're safe. I talked about broadband. The state's going to receive a minimum of $100 million to make sure that broadband is done. Drinking water, $45.1 billion investment gap in drinking water in the state of Texas. Under this bill, we're going to receive $2.9 billion over a 5-year period. You add that with state, local, and we believe there's an opportunity for private investment. There's going to be wonderful opportunities to modernize our water systems, get the lead out of the pipes, and making sure that we have safe, efficient water. Again, a critical issue, and we're very glad this bill includes it. Airports, Texas is going to receive $1.2 billion over the 5-year period to continue to modernize runways, to continue to see terminal expansions. Again, our aviation sector is a critical component in a global economy, both from an economic standpoint, but a tourism standpoint. And this bill is going to make some major investments to help our airports. Public transit, $3.3 billion is coming to Texas to modernize transit in the state. Certain communities already have existing transit systems. I'm thinking of San Antonio and Dallas, but communities are also looking at maybe enhancing or thinking again about how can we add transit, whether it's a light rail, it's a rapid bus system, it's streetcar. Transit communities around the country are looking at, young millennials are looking for multiple transportation options. The days of just young people waiting till they were 16 and getting a car, getting a driver's license, which I know I couldn't wait to drive, but there are younger kids today that aren't as comfortable driving and they don't want a car. And so making sure communities have the ability to choose, if they do, to have those multiple transportation options, we think could be a real selling point as you're attracting high-skilled millennial workers to your community. So again, this is a game-changing bill for the state of Texas, for our country. It's really something that has been a long time in coming. So I want to thank you all who have been part of that debate. But now the next phase of this effort begins. And that's really making sure that the investments that are coming to the state are going to the projects that are going to make the greatest difference in the lives of Texans. We had a infrastructure bill, which was a stimulus bill back in 2009. They called it infrastructure, they called it stimulus, and they used the word shovel ready. Unfortunately, shovel ready meant let's just get a bunch of people jobs quickly and let's do some simple projects, which were like fixing potholes and fixing curbs. And I'm not saying those aren't important, but this bill is a very different bill. This is about the long-term investment in our nation's infrastructure. The investments that are going to come from this bill are what we call shovel worthy. Those projects that are truly going to be game changers for your community, that are going to have impacts for 50 to 75 years to come. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to get those projects rolling. I know TxDOT, you'll hear from other speakers, they already have some plans. I'd like to give you all a few thoughts as they put together those plans. One is we think it's critically important that community leaders such as yourselves come together and make priorities of the projects that you need in the community. Communities that are able to show consensus within the various sectors of their areas and then go to their elected leaders, they have the best chance of getting their projects funded. So you cannot have dissension within the community about what are the key investments to make our economy grow, to improve the quality of life. So I encourage you to get together with all of your stakeholders in the community and come together with a list of shared priorities. It will really help. We love our public officials. They work hard, they do a good job, but we can't leave it up to them. And we believe the business community is uniquely positioned to help guide the investments to make sure they go to the right projects. Number two, about 90% of the funding in this bill is going to be put out through what we call a formula, which means the money will go to the state of Texas, the governor, the legislature, and the state Department of Transportation then will decide where the funds go. So you need to work with them for about 90% of it. 10% of the funding in this bill is going to what we call discretionary programs, which are competitive grant programs that you compete with projects around the country for limited funding. These are going to be projects that federal agencies such as the Department of Transportation, Department of Energy are going to have competitions. You have to apply for the funding, and then you'll see if you get it. And my advice to you all is if you want to compete in those areas, and I think you should, again, industry consensus within the community on the importance of that project, come up with a plan. So you show that there's some state, local, maybe private funding, and that you just need some federal gap funding. Filling that gap is what the federal government will do. The days of just having the federal government pay for the entire cost of the project are gone. But again, providing an opportunity, a plan, and a blueprint, and showing that you've already come up with some funding sources I think you'll have the best shot at getting some of these discretionary funds. Some of these discretionary funds are going for mega projects. They're going for electric charging stations. We're going to start seeing the announcement of these discretionary grant programs coming up in middle to end of February. There's going to be an application period that will go through June, and then we expect to see the federal government award these projects in the end of August, September timeframe. So, we will keep you updated as the federal government continues to put out those rules and those guidances. It's really another opportunity. It's another bite at the apple. So what you don't get from the state funding, you have an opportunity to use these discretionary grant programs to get some federal investment, to get projects that may not have gotten off the drawing board without additional gap funding. They can get off the drawing board. So again, there's wonderful opportunities moving forward from the funding standpoint. I also want to take a few minutes to highlight some other provisions in this bill that we really felt were important, and the reason the chamber supported it so well is you all know that, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a few years to get some of these big projects done. One of the challenges is always getting through the permitting process. It can take up to 7 years on occasion to get a permit and to get into construction. We were very excited that on a bipartisan basis, Congress included a provision that actually was done during the Trump administration under an executive order, which is called one federal decision, which means if you're getting federal dollars for a major project, there's a 2-year time limit on getting a permit approved. Again, this isn't changing environmental law. This isn't changing the important process of public input in looking at projects that move forward. But from our perspective, it kind of expedites and it makes it more transparent, the permitting process. And from our perspective is, let's get a yes or no answer. If the answer is no, then let's take limited dollars. Because again, even though I mentioned this bill, 550 billion, a trillion, it sounds like a lot. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we actually have a $2.8 trillion deficit. So this legislation in and of itself is not going to meet all the needs across the nation. So that's why making priorities, and we felt expediting project approvals through the permitting process was really an important part of this legislation. It's not one that gets talked about a lot, but again, making sure that we maximize the usage of dollars and put more dollars into the construction side instead of putting them into the permitting side, which can take a long time. And one of the things that, we always want to encourage private investment where it makes sense. But when you talk to private leaders around the country and they say, why aren't you investing more in America's infrastructure? You need to make sure that the permitting process is more transparent and timely. Because again, private sector isn't going to put money on the side if they don't see an opportunity. When's the permit going to come through? So again, very important part of this bill. Sorry about that. Very important part of this bill as we move forward. So again, encouraging private investment to supplement federal funding. We think there's some wonderful opportunities. I look at the state of Texas. We're really interested in what's going on with the Texas Central Rail Line, which is a private sector opportunity to have high-speed rail from Dallas to Houston. This legislation is going to make it easier to encourage private investment. Within the U.S. Department of Transportation, there's a Build America Bureau, which has technical expertise to help project sponsors utilize private investment where it makes sense. Again, it's a supplement. It's not a replacement for core federal investment, but it's a supplement to make sure that maybe we can get a few more projects off the sideline that had been because of lack of funding. Part of this bill as well raised the cap on what we call private activity bonds, which is a tool that you can utilize to have more private investment. It also has an infrastructure bank called TIFIA, which can leverage dollars. So again, all of this together is really going to make a difference in our perspective to communities like yours. So, as we wrap this up, this is a very important effort. I want to thank you all for all of your hard work moving this process forward. It's been about a 20-year effort. There were a lot of bumps in the road, but in our view, this was an effort worthy of getting done. It's really a once in a generational opportunity to not just fix, but to modernize. And as I mentioned earlier, we know that supply chain issues are going to continue, but as we continue to utilize these federal investments, we can continue to have regions like St. Marcos become distribution hubs, data centers. As our economy moves from a brick and mortar to an e-commerce, we need to have a 21st century infrastructure that allows that to happen. So this bill is going to really do that. I urge you all to thank those members of Congress who supported this bill. It was a tough vote for many of them. Those members who didn't vote for the bill, let's give them another opportunity to understand how these investments can transform your state, your community. There was a lot of misinformation about this bill. It was a very disappointing, some of the words that we heard, calling this socialist spending, calling this Trojan horse. You got to look at the bill, look at the facts. This legislation is bipartisan. The leader of the Republican Senate voted for it. It's something that we worked very hard with the Trump administration to try to get infrastructure done. Because a lot of people were saying to us, why couldn't you wait until a Republican was in the White House? We tried. But now is the time to get it done as we're getting through a pandemic, as we're looking at long-term economic growth. This is the time to make the investments that are going to last for a long time. So again, it's going to take a little while to ramp this up, because I know number one question I get is, when's the money coming? There's been some allocations made, but we don't expect the funds to be distributed until the end of February, early March. But I can tell you, your colleagues at Texas DOT, other agencies in Texas are already planning on how to utilize this funding. But let's make sure that we work with them in a collaborative effort to truly make these investments game changers, to make your community a more attractive place to bring people to live, to work, to thrive. And we at the U.S. Chamber are very excited with the partnership we've had with all of you to get this bill done. And we're going to keep that partnership together as we implement this bill and make sure the investments are truly game changers for your community. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you today. I wish I was there with you. I hope to get to St. Marcos region soon so I can start seeing some of the benefits of this infrastructure bill. So thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Ed Mortimer, everybody. Well, as you heard Ed mention, transportation issues nationally have an effect on us here in Texas. And our next panel is going to take a closer look at that and what is being done at the state level that could affect the I-35 corridor. Moderating our state leader panel is Mr. Jim Carrillo, VP and Director of Planning at Half Associates. And joining Jim on the panel is Ms. Cassie Froh, General Manager of our local Amazon Fulfillment Center, Mr. Willie Samora, South Travis Engineer of TxDOT Austin, Mr. Robert Carrillo, Vice President and Director of Transportation for Rodriguez Transportation Group, and Mr. Bert Wellman, Director of Residential Services at KFW Engineers and Surveying. Jim, panel's yours.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you all being here. Great words from Ed regarding where we're going nationally. Let's kind of zoom it down to our area. Let me set the stage for us. No matter where you are in our state, let's remind ourselves what transportation is at its most basic. It's moving people and goods. That's it. It's simple. But really, when you think about it in a bigger picture, transportation is one of the greatest shapers of our communities and, quite frankly, our entire region. Sometimes we talk about it in terms of mobility. So this bigger picture of what it links us, how it links us together, it grows our economies, it helps us connect with our families, it gives us the choice of where we can work or where we can play or where we can have fun. In fact, it gives us a tremendous amount of freedom. And that's one of the fundamental things that I think we need to think about, our region's ability to not just grow, but to thrive, to thrive. is intrinsically linked to this whole idea of transportation and greater mobility. So we've got a great panel here, and to talk about that from a statewide perspective and maybe from a regional perspective, but also something that impacts us. I'll ask them each a sort of a quick introductory question to get us going. So Willie, let's start with you, the big dog in the room, which is our collective Main Street, I-35. So what do we have to look forward to the I-35, especially in our part of the world here? And what are we doing that's different, better, or maybe more challenging than other parts of the state?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and appreciate that introduction. Be remiss if I didn't say I'm certainly a little bit smaller dog, I guess. Tucker Ferguson is our district engineer, and he couldn't join us today, so I'm filling in on his behalf, but certainly sends his thanks for our invite. You know, here in the Austin district, we have a strong mobility program. We have a strong mobility 35 program that's really targeted at delivering projects which are intended to address congestion and mobility throughout the entire Central Texas region. Here in Hays County alone, we've got several projects that we're undergoing. The Posey Road project we just finished, just up the road, I-35 at 123, ramp reversal projects that are ongoing in Kyle and the San Marcos area. And then most importantly, some of our safety projects, illumination and stuff of that nature, where we're really pushing to upgrade 35 throughout the corridor. You know, most of you have probably also heard about our Capital Express program, which consists of a north, central, and a south segment to upgrade I-35 through Travis County, but that's going to certainly have an impact on Hays County. So those projects are significant. They're going to significantly improve all modes of transportation throughout the region, and will relieve congestion in this area. So what are we doing different? You know, I believe that you're going to hear a common theme from me today, and I'm sure most of the panel members, and that is our partnerships. I think our partnerships, none of these projects, I know none of these projects would be able to be done without our partnerships that we have with our communities, local communities, our stakeholders, our development teams, our design engineers, and ultimately our industry that's building them. So I think here in the Austin district, we put a precedence on that, and that's what's helping us be successful on the I-35 corridor.
Absolutely, great. And I'm a denizen. I live on I-35, so great to hear great changes coming there. Bert, your perspective is a little different. So you're working in developments and sort of the other end of the scale. And so from your perspective, you're creating a different side of this transportation network in the area. What are the keys to making it work? What are you seeing happening there?
Right. So thanks, Jim. On the more the local development side, we're challenged with creating a good circulation within those developments, whether they be large or small. So we want to always ensure good traffic circulation within the developments, but then also we know that there's a burden to the infrastructure that's already there. So there's always a focus on how can we improve that adjacent infrastructure as well. But one of the things I was thinking was kind of interesting is how much of a focus we put on that internal development. What if that were expanded to a more regional concept, and really it's about access points and circulation and how these how vehicles can move in a little bit more of a free manner. And so when you look at more regional, you have your main corridors, your 35s, your 10s, even your state highways. What does it look like to start looking at some of these FM roads and doing some improvements, upgrading those to just provide better access regionally, and just kind of get ahead of the game, so to speak, on that. And I understand that takes money, that takes planning, coordination, like you were talking about, Willie. But at the same time, if we can create alternate means of access or additional, points to allow traffic to flow to where there's not such congestion at certain areas, I think, taking that local development type concept and applying it to that regional, improvement is something interesting. I think we could take a look at more.
Thinking more than just the big roads, the 35s, those
Right.
highways, the entire network. Great point. One area that continues to grow exponentially is e-commerce. And in fact, this last year, we saw e-commerce grow to about 13% of all retail sales across the country from about 4% a decade ago. So 13% of everything that we buy at some point or the other is e-commerce. In our region is a real proving ground for this. It's kind of an interesting area. So Cassie, of course, Amazon is at the forefront of this e-commerce movement. And what is Amazon doing in this region as compared maybe to the rest of the state?
Yeah, absolutely. So just in the last 2 years, since the start of 2020, demand for Amazon packages in all of Texas has more than doubled. For this area specifically, in the last 2 years, it's also more than doubled. It's lagging the state by about 2 or 3%, but increasing weekly packages delivered by several million packages a week just in this local area in the last 2 years. What's interesting is that 5 years ago in this area, we had 2 fulfillment centers and 1 middle mile delivery station. Since then, we're up to 5 large fulfillment centers in this area and 14 middle mile and last mile delivery stations. So that trend of expanding out middle mile, last mile through Amazon is really consistent through the rest of the state. But this area has had a huge growth in the fulfillment space that translates to local packages being delivered with 1-day shipping, same-day shipping, next-day shipping that we didn't have 5 years ago. And certainly the pandemic has increased the demand that our customers need for a myriad of reasons. But what we're seeing is that really shaped consumer behavior to just now, from a convenience standpoint, permanently shopping towards on the online space.
Fantastic. And Robert, your firm has been involved in design of many highways in this area over the past decade or so. And what do you see that we're doing well in this region, especially when it comes to expediting, getting these improvements built and on the ground?
Yeah, just I think flexibility within our industry and making adjustments on the fly. There's been so many obstacles over the last couple of years, projects being put on hold, others expedited. So we've been having to shift resources around and just focus on the end goal, which was getting projects ready for construction. And in some instances, that just means getting the plans done, putting them on the shelves and making them shovel worthy. In other instances, it may be the implementation of a management plan on Willie's project, the CapEx South project, I guess, to enable it to go to construction sooner. We developed a management plan that basically allows for construction to take part in certain areas along the project while right-of-way and utilities are adjusted in other areas. And that's typically used on the larger projects, but it is a strategy that allows construction and the turning of dirt to take place sooner.
And supply chain, of course, is something we always talk about. I think, Willie, anything that's specifically with materials, or how are you all dealing with all of that?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. We've got industry partners out in the audience, and they could speak to it more than I could, but I can tell you that, innovation, we're really looking at innovative solutions, different materials, things that thinking out of the box, right? But anything we can think of, from aggregates, concretes, hot mixes, we're seeing price increases right now in our asphalt industry. PVC, we use the example of PVC, just those little things that, whether it be COVID related, natural disaster related, we're seeing prices going up. And so we're just having to get innovative.
PVC is oil related, right? So price of oil goes up, PVC goes up. One thing that seems to keep coming up over again, and we heard Ed allude to it, is this whole notion, as we look at this challenge of improving our transportation system in this region. I think it's the idea of working together. And I know each of you have your own perspective on that, but that working together, that sense of partnerships, the days of one entity taking it on are gone now. It's got to be everybody working together. So how are we doing here as opposed to other parts of the state, or what are we doing well, specifically as it relates to partnerships? And Robert, let me start with you, because you had some interesting stories about SH 45 Southwest when you were working on that, and your sense of partnerships and how those work.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be the project manager during the design phase of State Highway 45 Southwest, and TxDOT and the CTRMA you know, they just encouraged stakeholder coordination. We had a number of workshops. I believe there were 6 total, where we had representatives from the city of Austin, Travis, Hayes County, the Barton Springs, Edwards Aquifer Conservation District. And we sat at a table and we just looked for opportunities to implement new strategies into the design process that would help protect water quality and at the same time minimize disruption. So this approach, it's not a new concept, but we took it to a higher level, and I think it yielded positive results during construction and allowed the project to be built and open to traffic in 2019. And a lot of the strategies that we implemented, when you drive the road, they're kind of hidden, but it's really cool to be part of that process and just gain a different perspective from other stakeholders on what they want to see.
2 opposite sides coming together and making it work. Great lesson.
Yeah, for
lesson
sure.
all of us. Cassie, Amazon in many places is in many places. And so you all are always looking for those partnerships. How do those benefit you? And what can you tell us about how that's working here?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, innovation, I think, fully comes from collaboration. We can't innovate best on behalf of customers or on behalf of our employees without the full collaboration, the full picture. The best way that we can do that, though, is meeting customers where they're at. And that means getting heavily involved with our employee base, heavily involved with our community locally, to just get a true understanding of what is everybody else anticipating, what are their wants, what are their needs, and then how can Amazon innovate on behalf of those folks. What we've seen locally and hopefully we've seen over the last 5 years is we've been involved with volunteer events, certainly in education space, partnering with the university, with the chamber. I really think that transportation is the next natural step for us to get really heavily involved with how the infrastructure is going to get built out in this area and what scale and scope that Amazon can offer to give back in that sense too. We're seeing really similar partnerships effective in places like Philadelphia and in Nashville. So I think it makes sense to bring it here as well.
Bert, at your level, how do partnerships affect, the developments that you're helping to design and that you're seeing put into the ground? How does that sort of work at that level?
It's truly collaborative, Jim. I mean, we don't go in and definitely, from the development side say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Because that just, it won't fly. And so we have to collaborate, as we're tying into state roads or, city roads, we have to collaborate with, TxDOT, with the city officials, with the county officials to understand, hey, what's the big picture here? Maybe there's already plans that are, have been put in place for this infrastructure, and we need to kind of merge in with that. So the other part of it too is, that we, especially on state roads, when we come in with developments, we always, when we're improving those roads, for instance, State Highway 123, we just had a large development going out there, or it's in the progress, but we're doing traffic signals, we're doing turn lanes, and there's donation agreements that are part of that process that we go through with TxDOT to, essentially ensure that those improvements are done. And so we work together closely with TxDOT, do those donation agreements, and developers are, like I said, it's just truly collaborative in that effort.
Absolutely. And Willie, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think it's really important to drive home that point, that we think of TxDOT as kind of this driving the ship all the time. But I think you've sort of opened my eyes about how TxDOT looks for those partnerships and looks for direction from communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I can't stress it enough. Here in the Austin district, I think I can speak for all districts in the state. Our goal is to really drive home and achieve that partnership. We can't do it alone. TxDOT cannot do it alone. Here in Hayes County, as a great example, we've got several partnership projects that we've done with our local communities, FM 2001, FM 110, all of these projects that are major connectors and facility upgrades that are going to move people in and around Hayes County, through and around San Marcos specifically, and Buda, all because of the Hayes County Bond Program and their ability to really push and be, forefront in achieving and delivering some of our needs and goals. You know, you're also going to hear later today, I think, from our Campo director, Ashby Johnson. And Campo is the heart and soul of our regional planning and funding efforts. It's everything that we do here at TxDOT. We work with Ashby's team and really make sure that we're delivering the exact needs that the Central Texas region and the Austin district needs every day, every year. And then you heard from Bert, our development teams. Bert hit it nail on the head. I mean, we are working with our development partners more now than ever to make sure that the system is being updated, upgraded, working with our developers to, take funding and partnership projects so that we can make sure that the system is safe and reliable for their developments and for travelers every day. So, and then last but not least, we talked a little bit a while ago about material issues and stuff like that. And that is the bond that we're gaining and we have with our industry partners, that trust to be able to deliver our projects and make sure that we're working through the challenges, whether they're related to labor, whether they're related to materials, COVID, whether our projects are being delayed with COVID, right? So we're just partnerships right now are more important than ever. I think if any of you were able to watch Tucker's press conference about the Capital Express program this week, he hit it in several points that we are listening to the community and we want to hear what you need.
Great. Let's talk now about sort of from a different perspective, this challenge that we all face. We want a great transportation system, but we all want many other things. There's a lot of other things that are important to us. For example, having different transportation options. I'm wearing my bicycle socks, so I'm on the bicycle side of things. I'm interested in that. We want to keep our beautiful hill country. All of us love this area because it is so beautiful. We also want the economy to grow. We want this to continue to be this great and thriving place. So let's talk about that. Cassie, from your perspective, again, Amazon's scale, and I'm just fascinated by the data that can help us from a transportation planning standpoint coming out from Amazon, but there are many other things. How do you see you all addressing these challenges, maybe even at the delivery level, all those kinds of areas that you all deal with?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways I could talk about this for several hours. From a transportation side in general, I think that's exactly one of the first steps that we have to offer from how can we build out better and more effective infrastructure just from the data that we currently have and what we expect that to trend like with similar metropolitan areas over the course of the horizon. One thing it's certainly a large focus, especially from keeping this region a gorgeous place to live and a gorgeous place to work and raise your families, is the focus on environmental sustainability. Especially for Amazon, we're growing at such an unprecedented pace in this area, doubling the demand over the last 2 years, but doing so in a really environmentally friendly way. So what some of the biggest focuses that we have are moving towards net zero delivery by 2030. And in this area, you'll see more sustainable packaging coming. Hopefully y'all have seen that if you've gotten any more recyclable materials in your packaging. We're focused on trailer utilization to try to reduce the total number of trailers on the road. And we've already deployed electric vehicle delivery vans in the Dallas area, and I see that coming to this region fairly soon as well.
Fantastic. Robert, what challenges do you see for moving ahead and trying to address sort of this balance between great transportation and this beautiful area that we live in?
Yeah, I think from the engineering perspective, it's just the unknowns. When we design facilities, we're looking out 20 plus years in the future and trying to project traffic patterns during that time. With the advances in technology and stuff like that, I'm not sure the old model applies anymore. So we just got to make sure that when we develop designs that we build in enough flexibility to accommodate any changes that may arise as we move forward.
So flexibility again as that key word. You were going to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to add to just thinking through that as well. Just how can we create infrastructure that is either going to work around natural weather events in the future as well, and certainly the snowstorm of last year. I hope that doesn't happen every single year from here on out. But as we have the rainy seasons and roads that flood, and how we can work around to either improve that infrastructure or work around that to still serve this area as well.
So very immediate responses to things like that.
Yeah, and I think to that, that you see a lot of things going on right now, like, what's really big is, providing an alternate access, like fire access, for instance. So, in case streets do get flooded, or if there's a major accident, there's an alternate route for cars to go. And so, days of like the kind of single access developments, you really need to have that alternate access there, to do that. But I think also too, it's, what does it look like to, build roads that, maybe are a little bit in undeveloped areas as well. I look at, I'm just going to use it as an example, Frisco, Texas. Like, when you drive up there, and I have some good friends up there, they have like these boulevard roads, and there's undeveloped areas, and they have a lot of traffic flowing through there. But what it does is it provides alternate means of access. And yes, I understand they take dollars and, those sort of things. But it's just, I guess when we're talking about that, when there's a choke point, it's hard to work around that. But if you have an alternate means, then, that definitely provides a good solution for that.
Yeah, Jim, just kind of add to those points. I mean, you're hearing innovation right here. Cassie, just thinking through the fact that Amazon is trying to get trucks off the road, right? I mean, for us as transportation engineers, it's getting to the point where we have to look for solutions that don't involve just capacity, but also involve innovative solutions. So that's awesome to hear. And certainly here at TxDOT, we second your winter storm sentiments. So. But I guess I would just close, and we were talking about freight and what freight looks like for the department and how we move freight through, specifically the I-35 corridor. And, really here at the Austin District, our goal, TxDOT as a whole, we have divisions that are associated with how do you move Amazon trucks, and how do we make sure our driveways are in the right place to facilitate safe, mobile, and strong mobility. Our goal is to make sure our system can suit the need, right? So as we see more development, whether that's inland or coastal distribution centers, we're looking for ways that we can make sure the facility is ready. One of the things here specifically in Central Texas and in Hays County, y'all all in this room know that Hays County, and forgive me if I misquote, Hays County is the second, if I read right, still second largest growing community. Is it first now, Judge? First. All right. So we are now the fastest growing county in the nation, right? And so growth, development, just everything that goes along with being that fastest growing county in the nation, that's our challenges. We got to hit that head strong.
Any closing thoughts? I mean, we talked about partnerships and flexibility and all working together. Any closing thoughts on the part of you all?
I was thinking about, you had mentioned the alternate means, and one of the big pushes right now is like hike and bike trails. You mentioned your bike side. And I can, in San Antonio, for example, there's a hike and bike trail that essentially runs from the south of town of Mitchell Lake all the way to downtown. I mean, just miles and miles of hike and bike trails that, where, and I know a lot of that's used for recreation, but, a lot of people, just want to, not drive their cars, in these regional kind of local areas. So I think, that's something that we're looking into with developments, how we can enhance that, that kind of that live, work, play type of scenario.
That fits right back into this whole big picture, this whole region. I mean, we haven't talked about the airport. We could talk about many other things in this area that are just such great contributors. I'm fascinated by this idea of a connection between San Antonio and Austin, the Great Springs project, and just kind of going along and just having this way you can go a trail. But I kind of keep hearing from all of you all this idea of flexibility, and more so than anything else, partnerships. And that's not exactly the most sort of innovative thing you've ever heard, but more so than any other time. I think it's just really critical for us to have that sense of we have to work together. The days of one sort of saying no, we've got to come together and figure out how we're going to do that. So I just go back to that point. We don't just want this area to grow. We want this area to thrive. We want this to be this fantastic area where everybody wants to come here, wants to be here, and wants to stay here. not just for the economic opportunities, but just because it's just this incredibly great place to be. So I think it's great panel, great ideas, great thoughts from Ed, and very much appreciate your insights that help guide us. Thank you.
Great conversation that we had. I know one thing that's happening here at the local level is the Texas Innovation Corridor Transportation Alliance. As part of Goal 3 of Vision 2025, this alliance strives to facilitate cooperation on current regional transportation initiatives, identify regional mobility solutions, and promote new transportation options for the future. Now, if you want to know more about the Alliance and what work they are doing in Hays and Caldwell counties, please reach out to GSMP staff liaison Catherine Terry or to Goal Champion John David Carson. Well, as you heard our state leaders mention, there is a lot of work being done throughout our region to handle incoming growth along I-35, but the growth isn't just corporations moving into the area. Residential growth is expanding along our highways, and new spec spaces are being built along I-35 in an effort to attract new businesses. Leading our conversation between our local leaders is the Executive Director of Campo, Mr. Ashby Johnson. And joining Ashby is Ms. Lori Moyer, the current Director of Engineering and Capital Improvements with the City of San Marcos. We have Kyle City Manager, Mr. Scott Sellers, Buda City Manager, Mr. Kenneth Williams, and the CEO of the SH-130 Concession Company, Mr. Doug Wilson. Ashby, conversation is yours.
So I'm going to welcome the rest of my panelists up and ask y'all to have a seat and we'll get started. So before we jump in, to sort of give you a tie to the last panel that we just had, one of the remarks that you heard was Mr. Wellman saying we needed a regional approach and to look at not just the freeways and large toll roads, but also look at some of the FM and RM roads and other ways of getting around. Your wish has been granted. From your lips to God's ear, we have been looking at corridors in the region, mainly FM and RM roads. We asked the policy board to give us as Campo staff $7 million in concession money that was paid when 130 was created. We're going to look at getting projects ready to go on a list of 10 corridors across the region. For this area, it would be State Highway 21 is one of them, State Highway 80. Also, other facilities, 12 we're looking at, 290 we're looking at, and making improvements there. The overall goal is to help not only the local governments, but also to help the TxDOT Austin district move projects forward. Having come from Houston and lived through the Katy Freeway expansion project, I know how much work it is for the district to do the CapEx I-35 project. And so while they're focused on that, we as Campo staff want to help them and local governments move forward with the other things while they're getting that critical piece of infrastructure ready for us to use in the future. So just to tell you, Mr. Wellman, we hear you and we're working on that. One of the things we're also looking to do is update some of the key studies that we've been tasked with doing. And to that point, the regional freight plan has not been touched since 2008. We're about to put a request for proposals out on the street in the next couple of weeks to remedy that problem. We would certainly love to have Amazon participate in that study with us and be one of the partners on the steering committee for it. With that, let me turn to my panelists, and you've heard some of this before. We're whether you're talking about Hays County or you're talking about the region in particular, we've got several of the fastest growing counties and the fastest growing cities If you look at the top 10 list, they're in this region, they're in this 6-county region. And, sometimes it's a struggle to keep up, but I feel like we're blessed with great economic growth. And this is one of the outcomes of that growth. And I want to also stress the partnership that we all have, whether it's us as local governments and as Campo and transportation organizations, but also with TxDOT and Capital Metro and other players in the game. So with that, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we have going on within our local governments and jurisdictions here. So Lori, tell us a little bit about San Marcos.
Oh, boy, I get to start. I think there's several things going on in terms of transportation. We're very fortunate. We participate in the policy board, the mayor does. We have staff. I participate on the technical advisory committee, and we've recently have participated in several of these regional studies. Campo funded a study within San Marcos to look at some of our major corridors, Highway 80, Hopkins, SH 123, Guadalupe, and also a potential north-south connector east of IH 35. And what this does with Campo is it helps us to identify what do those corridors need to look like and how do they integrate in with our community. And that's been going on for over a year. I think we're at the final stages to wrap that up. And with that came some land use planning. San Marcos has also participated in another Campo study, the Western Caldwell Connection Study, which has been very important in terms of connecting IH 35 into Lockhart and ultimately to SH 130. And that's one of those issues that Jim really honed in on coordination. This is a study that's led by Campo, predominantly affecting Caldwell County, but that last connection goes through San Marcos, and it goes through San Marcos in an area that's rapidly developing. And in Hays, it's in Hays County. And so we really got to the point towards the end of the study where we had some good constructive discussions with Hays County and the city of San Marcos and the developer to come up with a solution of how are we going to make these ties together. And that speaks to what Mr. Burt Wellman talked about is many times when you have a rapidly growing area like we do, you need to bring that development community into that discussion so they know what they're playing with. So anyway, that's two of the studies that are going on along with all the other planning efforts that Ashby keeps us busy with.
So Scott, you're in a lot of ways at ground zero with some of the rapid both population and employment growth. Tell us about Kyle.
All right, so thanks, Ashby. Lots been said about partnerships and regionalism. And, when you look back to the past, we operated in silos. And if you think about just 22 years ago, where were you in the year 2000? Much of us, or many of us were in college or, in our career, our families. In the year 2000, City of Kyle was 5,000 population. But put that into perspective, 5,000 people. And many people knew Kyle as the Dairy Queen stop on I-35, right? We estimate to be eclipsing 60,000 people now. So in 22 years, from 5,000 to 60,000. What that means for us is just an insane amount of growth and sophistication, but we've inherited a lot of substandard infrastructure. So as we've looked at our planning initiatives now, 20 years ago, we didn't have plans for the city. Now we have full transportation master plans, water plans, wastewater plans, et cetera. And we finally have control of our destiny. But what we found is that the unfunded liability is incredible. Citizens are expecting not just health, safety, and welfare to be taken care of, but infrastructure, quality of life, jobs, everything kind of comes together at once. Finding a way to fund that really starts with growing our sophistication as a city. I would say our city leadership is much more sophisticated. The political level, the county level, our planning efforts are much more sophisticated. And we are now working with Campo, with TxDOT, and with our other regional partners like GSMP on plans that we never thought we'd be working on today. And so it's great to have these plans in place. It's great to be sophisticated enough to know what we need to do. And the time for planning, though, I think has now come and is passing, and implementation is the next phase. And we look forward to being part of that.
I agree with you that we need to be pushing more of the project development phases of things now. Planning still has an important role, but we need to be pushing project development a lot more, both at the local and at the state levels. So Kenneth, you're right across the line from Travis County, and when folks are looking for affordability, one of the first places they look is Buda, because it's right there across the line, and so you're kind of right there as the vanguard. So tell us about the progress we're seeing in Buda.
Okay, thank you first for having me here today. It's been likewise the Greater San Marcos Partnership and the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, we're in the unique position on being in the north side of the county. Buda actually shares some ETJ with the city of Austin. So we are, I guess, the closest to Austin from this perspective on this part of the county. So what they do impacts us. You know, what they're doing with their project and what they're doing with their bond as far as transportation impacts Buda. What they're going to do to add transportation lanes to I-35 ends at SH 45, where Buda stops. And likewise, whatever they're doing with the mass transportation, what they're talking about doing with rail, bringing it to South Park Meadows, that's going to impact Buda and people in Buda to do that. So Travis County has a tremendous impact on us, but who we deal with every day are the people on this platform, the people of Hays County. We partner extensively with the entities in Hays County. You know, the county itself, we have so many joint projects that we're doing with Hays County that it keeps staff really, really busy. And so, I mean, we're doing Robert S. Light, which is going to be a bypass, which will benefit Cal. Likewise, it might even create a loop for Cal. The city of Buda is partnering in reconstructing part of that road, but also Hays County and TxDOT is looking at extending that road over to 1626, which will relieve a lot of traffic issues for Buda and Main Street and what's going on there. Ashby, we partner with Campo. We're fortunate enough to get 2 grants from Campo, one for the study of the 1626-967 intersection. If you know about the 1626-967 intersection, you know it's one of the most congested intersections in Hays County. Because we have 4 schools in proximity, and we have the north-south traffic from Kyle going to Austin every day, and we have the people coming from Driftwood trying to get to I-35, and it just creates quite some congestion right there. And likewise, also, Campo has given us a grant for Garlic Creek Parkway study. So we're fortunate to have those relationships for sure. And let me mention SH 45 too. That would really benefit us, benefit the county. So we are looking at doing some partnering with the Hays County on that too.
Okay. So Doug, State Highway 130, in my opinion, is just as important as I-35 to this region. And I know we haven't seen the transactions on segments 5 and 6 be what we would like them to be. I think that's going to change and probably quicker than we think. But I'd like to hear what things the 130 concessionaire is working on.
Sure. Thanks, Ashby. And also thank GSMP for allowing me to be on a panel with these 3 great communities. We're very happy and very proud to be here, though we are in Guadalupe and Caldwell County and a little bit in Travis. We do border the eastern area that the growth is heading in the direction of. And as Ashby said, maybe the traffic hasn't been what it was originally expected to be. But in SH 130, what you're seeing is very far-sighted actions taken by the state many years ago, knowing that this growth was going to happen. And so what we have now is really a free-flowing artery from Skeen all the way to Mustang Ridge and then north into the upper sections of SH 130. And that is a tremendous amount of capacity for development, for existing travel. And it's there waiting for the development that we know is going to come in that direction. We're already starting to see some of it. In 2021, we achieved traffic levels that were 25% above the pre-pandemic levels. And indeed for trucks, which is what the road was originally really focused on, that growth was over 35%. So what we're seeing is a terrific alternative to I-35 in this north-south route, particularly in the cargo that's coming up and the trucks that are returning to Laredo Crossing. So this is just a huge asset for the region. And part of what we're excited about is working with Campo and with these communities to get better access to SH-130 to facilitate some of that growth so that we're not so dependent on I-35. And we're really looking forward to working with everybody to make sure that that happens.
Thanks, Doug. So one of the things that we've been doing, Caldwell County is our client. And we've been, as you heard Lori allude to earlier, we've been working on what we call the Western Caldwell County study. And we were looking at potential connections between I-35 and State Highway 130. And we're pretty far along on that. I'd say we're within 8 to 9 months of being done with the study. The preferred corridor is looking like State Highway 142 for the bulk of that. We're excited about the opportunities that can come out of that. And some we're seeing interest already from developers that want to be located either near Lockhart and especially near 130. And I think we're going to see that grow. I'm hearing about other folks that I not even known that we're talking to Caldwell County now about potentially locating in that area. I think we're going to see growth also in that area because of the development we're seeing in Tesla. But we're going to see a lot of growth employment-wise in Hayes County and in Caldwell that's going to necessitate not just a northward movement on 130, but also southward movement on 130 from people going to work and people bringing goods and services to us. So, so Lori, if you could sort of wave the magic wand and pick your top priority for things you might want to have fixed, what things might it be?
Well, I think it would be hard to just pick one, but I think that what the previous panel alluded to is the quality of life issue, and then the balance with growth is really important. I know one of the things that is occurring in San Marcos that's wonderful is we're moving forward with an integrated transit system with Texas State, which provides opportunities to maximize our federal allocations for performance. And it allows us to increase those opportunities for people to use transit by expanding service. But I think as we go forward in looking at ways to improve transportation as we grow, what sticks in my mind is kind of three things that I look at. The first one is we need to have alternate modes of transportation. We need to make sure that it's safe to walk or scooter or bicycle and to drive your car. Not everyone is going to do some of the others, but we need to keep all those modes of transportation in there. And with that, the flexibility to shift those as time goes on. The second is we need to have alternative routes. That's been brought up by multiple panelists, and that's one that Campo and Ashby have really facilitated. I agree we need to work regionally. I was excited to hear Mr. Mortimer talk about that if communities come together, like we have with ARWA water supply, if we started to do that same thing with some key corridors, how we could maximize that interregional connectivity. And then I've already forgotten what the third one is, so I'll let someone else go.
So Kenneth and Scott, y'all are dealing with much the same things. What things would you pick?
Well, it's been made easy for me. The Butte City Council, in their wisdom, passed the strategic plan last year. And also they passed a new transportation master plan. So out of that, there were priorities and projects identified there. So I don't have to wave a magic wand. I just look at the book and see what they've identified in there. And in doing that too, we had a bond election. Council put an election on the ballot last November where we passed a transportation as a part of the overall bond, a transportation bond of $72 million. So we have dollars for that, for priority for some projects. Just a few things. Some of it's for local streets, particularly on the west side of Butte. Those communities are starting to age, getting a 20-year bracket where some of the streets are starting to need some repair. But then also there's some things along I-35, some connection issues. We're looking at a connector from Old San Antonio to the frontage road of I-35 to provide more access. And even some dollars if SH-45 does come into play to where we can partner with Hayes County or somebody, dollars there. So council has identified many things, even some new roads in town, east-west. As you mentioned, 90% of the people in Butte go somewhere else to work every day. So we have a lot of people who commute. So in the wisdom of council, with the strategic plan and with the transportation master plan, we have a good idea going forward of what we want to do.
So, a magic wand is an interesting thought because, we have applied the same solutions to problems that are beyond the solutions for so many years. And I think it's time that we start thinking more innovatively. And so I'd love to see more innovative or creative solutions to our existing problems. And they're out there. So let me give a few examples of what I'm talking about. We cannot build roads fast enough, wide enough to accommodate all the growth. It's just not going to happen. We talk about the alternative transportation methods. One thing that we are doing in Kyle, instead of implementing public transit, which is just traditional, which buses, et cetera, is we partnered with Uber, and we have the Uber 314 program. Uber is our public transportation system in Kyle. So the city subsidizes all of the rides in Kyle directly with Uber, and our residents pay a fraction of the cost for regular transportation. Now it runs demand-based, 24/7, 365. It's a private sector solution to a public sector issue. The second one is we are creating a trail system, over 80 miles of trails throughout the city. And these are not just standard recreational trails, but because we're talking about transportation alternatives, this is a 12-foot wide concrete trail through the city, accessible to every neighborhood, to allow not just recreational uses, but golf carts, ATVs, things like that. So it allows this electrification of vehicles, but for short trips as well, as we're trying to create more jobs closer to home, keep people closer to home instead of clogging up those materials. And then finally, we in Central Texas have been talking for years about mass transit and what are those solutions. Many years ago, I think, yes, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, we had Lone Star Rail. We really pushed that forward, and because of Union Pacific, because of funding initiatives, very, would say, straightforward, again, traditional solutions that never materialized. So how are we going to think more innovatively, more creatively? Is it managed lanes? I'm not sure. I think that's part of the solution. Are there multiple solutions there? Maybe. But, we have, again, our private sector coming to us saying, hey, we have things like Hyperloop, for example, the Boring Company. So the ability to sit down with private sector to come up with cost affordable alternatives to public problems is really where we need to go next.
Okay. And I want to, while I still have a few minutes left, want to applaud the three of you. One, for the partnership, but two, one of the biggest impacts on transportation is land use. And all three of you are aggressively working to improve land use in your communities, and that's a help to us. And that's not everywhere, and that's why I'm taking the time to thank you for it, because not everybody's doing that, and not everybody's seeing that. So Doug, you're gonna get the last word. So what can we do to help 130?
Well, I think the short answer is keep doing what you're doing, right? The growth here, as evidenced by this gathering today and many, many other efforts by TxDOT, by Campo and by others, is really thinking about these issues, coming up with better solutions and implementing those. And I think that the infrastructure bill that was the subject of the keynote address today is going to provide funding for some of that. What we will do in terms of our part is we'll continue to focus on the needs of this community as you grow east, which you're sure to do, and make the connections. We already have plans and drawings for connections at the most likely connection points, those being 80, 142, and 21. And the capacity's there. We stand ready, and we look forward to being the new backbone, the east backbone of the growth in this region. Because look, development, growth, y'all want a couple of things. You want to have qualified employees, which this region is certainly producing, and you want to be able to get around. And we have a contribution to make there.
All right, thank you very much. And we're on time. Help me thank the panelists.
So I appreciate all of you guys taking the time to join us. Thank you. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.